Hello, and welcome to Check It Out with EVPL. I'm your host, Aaron.
My name is Chase Brazier from Red Bank.
Yeah, so we got Chase over there, and what about you? Who are you?
My name is Ryan, and I sometimes just walk in and sit down, and you guys have to listen to me.
Yeah, but I think for today, you will be the one listening.
Oh, yes.
Because we have a very important topic to discuss, but first, a very important question to lead into the topic. Chase, did you know wrestling is fake?
It's still real to me.
That is, very famous callback to some YouTube video that made the rounds a long time ago. Anyways, yes, we are talking about professional wrestling today. Ryan, what's your experience with that?
I got called Ric Flair a lot as a kid. If you've ever seen me, I had like Snow White hair as a child.
Oh, okay.
So they made me go, woo, a lot, and I didn't really get the reference, but that's about it.
I'm glad that's the only reason why they called you Ric Flair.
Okay.
So did you wear robes a lot?
No, not that they knew.
All right, now Chase, what's your experience with wrestling?
I became a fan when I was kind of the preteen years as a kid. I had an older sister that had an ex-boyfriend that watched it, and I was like, oh, he's cool, so maybe I should watch it. But I always thought that due to how it was always portrayed in movies and TV, that it was very dumb. But then I actually watched it, and I got really into it, and I just realized it's just a giant soap opera, but with fighting. So I got really into it, and then I fell out of it, and then I got really into it again, and I'm now like in a purgatory of, yeah, it's really cool, but I don't make time to watch it. So that is my experience with wrestling.
There's so much wrestling, though. Like, there is between, like, just prime time. How many hours are we up to? Like, 10 hours a week?
I don't even know. I think that you pretty much have to clock in for, like, a work day when you watch, like, a Monday Night Raw that's 4 hours long.
Yeah. Because you've got Raw that's 3 hours on Monday. Tuesday nights you have 2 hours of NXT. Wednesday nights you have 2 hours of AEW. Friday nights you have 2 hours of SmackDown, and that's weekly. That doesn't even include like the pay-per-views or what WWE calls the premier events. I don't know.
Yeah, the main TV ones, and then you have AEW becoming even bigger with their every so often pay-per-views as well, which are another 3 to 4 hour investment. And then you get the WrestleMania weekend, and that's what, it's a 5-night weekend or something like that now.
Yeah.
Or it feels like it, and it's like 3 to 4 hours for 3 nights in a row or something like that. And it's kind of like when you walk into a library and you're like, I want a book. Oh, there's a lot to choose from.
Yeah, you come in, you're just like, hey, I want a book on philosophy. And it's just like, oh, well, which of the 200 plus books do you want to start with? It's hard to be, if you really want to be a wrestling fan, it's hard to really do it casually because there's so much to keep up with.
Yeah, definitely. So what about your experience with wrestling? Like, how long have you been a fan or watched it or stopped watching it?
So I got back, well, I originally got into it when I was a kid. I started watching over at a neighbor's house because my parents weren't really too big on that stuff, and really got into it. Eventually, when my parents saw that it wasn't turning their sweet, sensitive boy into an aggro rage head, they allowed me to start watching at home. So I watched through what is known as the Attitude Era. So yeah, like
Attitude. That's a good adjective. One of those. I work at a library.
Yeah. That was like what people claim to be like when WWE was like at its peak in popularity. Lots of really PG-13 stuff, blood, like really more extreme matches. So I watched that.
And PG-13 being very tame description of some of the stuff that they allowed to even air back then.
It would lean into like soft or R sometimes, I guess.
Definitely.
Without getting into specifics. So of course, like as a 13-year-old boy, that was awesome. And after I started high school, I got out of it, just got really busy. I was just too busy being awesome in band. So then I actually got back into it around 2015 in the most unlikeliest way. My wife started watching Total Divas. And I would just start watching it with her. And then I'm like, hey, I remember I used to like wrestling. So then I started watching the main wrestling shows. And that's how I got back into it. So ever since then, I've just been like really all about checking into what's going on with WWE, AEW, New Japan Pro Wrestling, Ring of Honor, NWA, MLW. Don't worry about it. Don't worry
That's
about it.
a lot
Ryan.
of stuff.
Don't worry about it.
I bet those letters stand for something.
Some of them do.
Some of those I just made up.
Yeah. You could easily do that.
Now that I think back, I feel like my first real entry into wrestling was there's an old 80s movie starring Hulk Hogan, and he was a like super spy type character, and it was called like the Nanny or something like that, or Super Nanny, or what was that called?
No, it was like the Nanny, I think, because I remember the VHS cover having him like dressed in like a tutu or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because he eventually learns to, I don't have to be the super buff macho guy to save the day. I can save the day by being this little girl's role model.
Yeah.
Starring Hulk Hogan.
Does he also kill a bunch of people in it?
Probably. It was the 80s,
Okay.
So.
Yeah, you had to. Vin Diesel would thank him later in the pacifier.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks for reminding that movie existed.
You're welcome, guys. I'm here to help make life better.
So, in terms of, I guess, things that every stereotypical wrestling fan talks about is probably the first big one being their favorite wrestlers. So, who would you consider some of your favorite wrestlers?
I'm going to go ahead and just start editing this list in my head because I have wrote down way too many. But I'm going to stick with just a couple. When I was really into wrestling as a kid, my favorites were Bret Hart, Owen Hart, Eddie Guerrero, Rey Mysterio, and Chris Jericho.
Some solid choices, especially with the Hart Foundation, with a solid chunk of that, as well as the entire like lucha style wrestling that you also get with Mysterio, Guerrero, and even Jericho, because I know he was almost like a mixture of like the Bret Hart and Guerrero lucha style almost, at least in my eyes.
Oh no, I definitely agree with that.
Yeah. For me, I also have like a growing up favorites list and then a list of who I like currently. Growing up, of course, I loved Stone Cold Steve Austin. It's not because I'm a bald guy with facial hair. It was definitely like the, stick it to the man mentality. And also I think he has one of the coolest finishers of all time. Also loved Rob Van Dam, especially because I felt like he just stole his name from Jean-Claude Van Damme, and he just thought that sounded cool. And he's like, I go by Rob, that's 3 letters. Van and Dam is 3 letters too. I got something here. And then also loved the Hardy Boys and Dudley Boys, and how in very 90s style, boys is spelled B-O-Y-Z, not with an S.
It's superior, obviously.
Definitely. And then, of course,
Breaking all the rules.
Who doesn't love The Rock, who is now, which I never thought he would become almost more well known as Dwayne Johnson, but I feel like he's kind of hit that now, where he is known as Dwayne Johnson to a lot of people, but he's always The Rock. And then, because I loved the Hardy Boys, I loved Lita, who was like their manager, who'd also like jump into the fray and stuff. But yeah, those were some of my favorites. And then also loved Eddie Guerrero. I feel like we're going to have a lot of things where we like agree. It's like, oh yeah, love that wrestler, or that match, or whatever.
Well, yeah, and the Hardy Boys and the Lita as their manager, that was like definitely like really great time in like the tag team division. Hey Ryan, quick check. Have any questions so far? Any terms for me to explain?
So his name is Dwayne The Rock Johnson, not Dwayne The Frog Johnson.
That is correct.
Okay, I was lied to by someone close to me, and now I'm mad.
Okay.
But also, on random news, did you hear about... he owns the XFL now.
Yes, he does.
Him and his ex-wife.
Yeah, and they're rebooting it for 2023, I think.
I think it's supposed to be coming up.
Yeah.
And you think, you peel it back a couple layers, and it's crazy. You think about the fact that he bought it from Vince McMahon, who was his former employer in the WWE. I mean, kind of like really, that's a pretty good success story, I think.
Yeah, that would definitely be like being a fry cook at McDonald's and then going to Ronald McDonald and saying, this is mine now.
Mine.
and then you give him a stunner.
But also, I've heard of John Cena, and he's in movies too, so that's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, I think it's funny how pretty sure it was Hulk Hogan who kind of first made like the Hollywood kind of jump, like him and like Roddy Piper, who he's in one of the best.
Oh my gosh, they live.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's just amazing that like, mainly because a lot of times you think, oh, a wrestler's about to go to Hollywood, it's just going to be a cliche action kind of thing, which is definitely how The Rock's career, I felt like, started. But then he started doing like a couple of different roles that kind of let him do a little bit more, and now he's become easily the biggest star in Hollywood probably. But now John Cena has definitely followed that path for sure, and he's gone from the Superman character of basically WWE into now he's like playing Peacemaker, which is probably the antithesis of Superman.
Well, and he also was like The Rock. He was like starring in a lot of like bland action movies.
The Marine.
The Marine, yes,
take that
12
back.
rounds. I will not, sir. And but then he started to kind of like pull back a little bit. He started doing like supportive roles in comedies and kind of showing people that he had like a lot of a wide range to him. And I think that's what ultimately led him to getting like his biggest role, Peacemaker.
Yeah, and Ryan, would you believe me if I told you that John Cena is one of the most polarizing figures in professional wrestling of all time?
What?
So essentially, during a lot of his matches, you would hear maybe 25 to 40% of the crowd chanting, "Let's go Cena."
Cena sucks.
But hey, let's go Cena.
Cena sucks.
Granted, the majority of the "Let's go Cena" chanting crowd were usually under the age of 16 years old for the most part, and then everybody else were all the fans from like the Attitude Era and stuff, because John Cena kind of got some hate for always winning, never being able to lose, and
Because he's the best. Duh.
that's what they want you to think.
Yeah.
And I was definitely part of the Cena sucks crowd. I was kind of tired of seeing the same match over and over again, but as I got older and I learned more about what he does, especially with like the Make-A-Wish Foundation, he holds like the record for the most wishes granted, and he's still going. Like, it's like amazing, a lot of the charity work that he does, and that definitely kind of won me over to really appreciating him. And it's kind of like, man, I feel bad for kind of chanting that he was not good at what he does.
Well, and I missed that part, but going back and like reading up and watching videos, it does seem like, and we can kind of get into this aspect of wrestling, it seemed for a long time people were wanting him to turn heel. And I mean, that's pretty common phrase in pop culture. Like, have you ever heard that?
Become a bad guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, through like some, like you hit your partner suddenly in the back when they're not looking, and or you cheat in a match when you've been like a noble person up to that point. And so people typically want someone to turn heel when they feel like they're a pretty bland or blasé character at that point. And so that's why a lot of people, I think, were really hanging on John Cena because they wanted to see something different, and they knew turning him heel would produce something different.
Before we get too far away from it, whenever we were talking about the movie careers, I just wanted to know if you guys had the inside scoop as to why Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson
Correct.
enjoys filming movies with jungles in them.
I do
Because
love that motif of his.
I mean,
Because
it made more
there's-
sense when I thought he was a frog.
Because The Rundown is kind of in the jungle, which is one of his first movies with
Sean William Scott.
Stifler, right?
Yeah, Sean
Okay.
Williams. Yeah. Sorry, his birth name, Stifler, yes.
So there's a jungle in The Rundown.
Both
There's
Jumanjis.
Both Jumanjis.
He was in the second Journey movie.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah.
Is that Journey to the Center of the Earth? Or?
Yeah.
Okay, he was
But for
in
kids.
Oh, okay.
Jungle Cruise.
Jungle Cruise.
What?
Which even has jungle
I
in it.
never knew this motif before.
You never noticed it?
You never noticed that he's always in a jungle?
No,
If you-
I never thought of
Like-
it. Even though like The Rundown is like seriously one of my favorite movies.
I feel like there's probably even a jungle in one of the Scorpion King movies. Which makes
it's
zero sense
adjacent.
that
It's
it
Yes, there is.
adjacent,
There is.
Yeah.
He's not in the jungle at any point, though. But then again, he's only in that movie for like 20 seconds, his poorly CGI'd face.
Right.
But there's also the full-blown Scorpion King movie
Oh no, I'm thinking of
Brendan
You're
Fraser.
thinking of the Mummy
I'm thinking of the
Returns.
Mummy Returns, Scorpion King. I think there is a jungle at one point. So, I mean, I think from what we've learned from this is that we could probably make our own movie, set it in a jungle, and get him to get on board. He would do it, right?
I mean, yeah. I mean, he's been doing jungle movies in all like points of his career. Like, it's not like
Sweet.
he's like, oh, I don't need to do another jungle movie anymore. I pay my dues.
We can
Like,
do the 5th Jungle Book. How many remakes of that have there been? Let's just do it again. And put The Rock in it.
I do. I remember.
Would he be Baloo?
Yes.
you.
He's sung before.
Well, I was gonna say that
Moana.
SNL.
That's a jungle
Oh
too.
yeah. That's associated. Well, he was the movie Be Cool. He wasn't in Jungle, but at the end he was doing like a part of a Hawaiian dance.
Oh yeah, because he is Samoan.
Yeah.
And like one of like the Chaka dances, I think. Are
Yeah.
they called?
I'm so glad I successfully derailed this.
No, he should be. Also, I just remembered that SNL skit he did where he like played like an action hero version of Bambi.
I need to look that up.
What if it's just that his favorite book is like In the Heart of Darkness, which takes place in the jungle, right?
Maybe that's what he was read as a child.
He's very well read, actually.
And he's just been trying to prove himself that like, no, the jungle is a place of magic and fun, like not like the darkest desires of men.
Well, this has been fun. Back to our main course.
Yeah,
Wrestling.
Wrestling.
Yeah, I definitely know that we kind of shifted from like favorite wrestlers, but I think we should also talk about kind of like the favorite moments of such that made us stand up out of our chairs and yell, even though maybe we were in the crowd when it happened, maybe we weren't. But I know that wrestling is just full of great moments that you always kind of remember back to, and for me, watch over and over on YouTube and imagine that I was there. It's like, oh, that's so cool, and I wish I was there.
I mean, I've got a lot of classic ones on my list, but the first one I'll mention is the most recent one that took place at SummerSlam last Saturday.
Didn't watch it.
But do you know the last match?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So
Tell
one
me
of the
about
wrestlers, Brock Lesnar, drove a tractor to the ring and then lifted the ring with a tractor. Yeah.
That's not something that's allowed.
It's not part
That's
of it.
against the rules.
It was a last man standing match, so no disqualification.
Oh.
Yeah, and I would have to say a tractor is probably the most foreign object I've ever seen in a wrestling match so far.
Yeah, that's saying something, right?
Well, it became like its own character. Like they were using it to like he dumped his opponent into the ring with it at one time. It was Chekhov's gun because he brought it to the ring. You're like, they're playing something big with it. And then when he lifted the ring near the end, you'll see if you go back and watch like matches with like say the Big Show and Braun Strowman, and I can't remember who else they did. But like if they have two big guys on the top rope and they do like a move off of it, they'll have like the ring explode. But besides that, I've never seen anything like this, like where they lift a ring in the middle of an arena with like 40,000 some people watching. It was absurd, and it's one of the things I love about wrestling, when they just lean into the absurdity of it.
So you think they're going to see the ratings with that tractor and they're going to like introduce it, and the next one is like its own wrestler? You got to wrestle the tractor.
I mean,
Like that Rick and Morty with the car versus person.
I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of country songs about tractors that they can use as this theme song. What about you, Chase? What's some moments you got?
Gosh, I have so many. Some of these I remember watching live. Some of them I did not see them live. And by live, I meant like on television, because I've yet to go to an actual show. But I would definitely watch it. The thing that makes a great moment for me is the pop, which is like when the crowd just erupts. And they either erupt in cheers or it's just the loudest groan of all time. They're both great. So one of mine, there was this storyline where WCW and ECW were the bad promotions, and they were invading WWE, and it was called The Invasion. Riders are amazing. So they're like, the ring has like 40 wrestlers in it, just beating each other up like crazy. And this whole time you're like waiting for Stone Cold to show up, and the crowd's chanting like Austin, Austin. The whole time they keep showing him, he's like all sad. He's like in a bar drinking beer, and he's just like, I just don't have it anymore and stuff. It's very much like the old gunslinger who's like being called back for one last showdown in the street, and then finally like some of the greatest theme music ever. The glass shatters, the crowd erupts, and then his music hits, and he runs down to the ring, and he does his special move, which, of course, in wrestling, the special move is something you build up to the whole match, and then all of a sudden it's like boom, and then it's like that's like the climax of the match, and then it's over. He just decides to just use a special move on like 15 different people, like in a row. And then the commentary is going insane. They're losing it. So that's one of my favorites. And there's also, I love debuts whenever someone's maybe like in the indies or they're like in promotions that are smaller and they have kind of like a lot of hype and stuff. And they're like, oh, they would never sign that person. There's no way. But then they do, and they show up without any, like, it's really hard to do now because of social media and people are like, oh, I just saw this person. He's at the arena or like he or she's at the arena. They're going to debut and whatnot. So I'm trying to think of some of my favorite debuts. There's one with Shinsuke Nakamura. He was huge in Japan, and he speaks some English, and a lot of people were thinking that, oh, because he doesn't speak English very well, they probably won't make him like a big star or anything. Then he came to like NXT, which is like the minor leagues, and then they put him into like the main show, and the crowd's like chanting his theme song, and all he does is go out to the ring and bow, and then he leaves, and the crowd is like losing because they just can't believe that he's there. So I love like big debuts like that. They're like some of my favorite things for sure. And then I do remember watching, there's one wrestler, Triple H, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, if I pronounced that correctly.
Yeah.
Real name Paul Levesque. Clearly I know a little bit about him. But he tore his quad, and he was gone for almost like a year, and then he returned at Madison Square Garden. His music hit, and just the crowd just losing because he was the bad guy, and he's always been a bad guy, but people saw that kind of like, man, that guy really put in a lot of work for wrestling and stuff and like entertaining, and then just the amount of just adoration and love they showed him, it was like a pretty touching moment. So those are definitely some of my favorite moments. And I'd be remiss being from Paducah, Kentucky, and not mentioning like seeing a guy I went to high school with, Ricochet, making it to WWE and being like, I know that guy. We've hung out a couple times, and we shared chicken wings before. Like now he's doing flips and stuff on TV. It's insane, and winning titles, and then being buried sometimes. So
yeah, being buried is when like you've got like considerable talent, but you're not being booked for anything for whatever reason. Which hopefully that changes with new people
in charge.
Yeah. He's got to bring more of his guys in. Anyways, so you mentioned like indie people coming into like big pops. AJ Styles debuting at the 2016 Royal Rumble.
I believe so. Yes.
So when we say indies, like all those acronyms I just kind of rambled off.
Yes, the one that wasn't the ones that weren't WWE
or AEW. Like indie,
like
like indies are basically just kind of like smaller promotions that don't really have as big of financial backing or like stock options like WWE, and so that's where a lot of these guys get their start because they, they're all like pretty much like independent contractors. So AJ Styles had been like this darling in the indies for a long time, but they never really considered him to come to WWE. So in the Royal Rumble, he was like number 3, I think, and they started playing. They started playing music, and you can, if you get a chance, go to YouTube and watch it. You'll see people like just kind of start mumbling to each other because they don't know. It's music they've never heard before. And then when the words "I am phenomenal" pop up on the screen, which is like what he called himself, phenomenal AJ Styles, like the whole crowd erupts, which is crazy for someone who up to that point had never been in WWE to get that type of reaction from a WWE crowd.
For sure. And the worst part about it is when you watch, if you're watching it happen, the camera wasn't even looking at the crowd when they realized that it was AJ Styles. It was on Roman Reigns, who's now like essentially the current day Rock of sorts in terms of like being the guy and like the champ and all that kind of stuff. But the camera was just on his face, and he just gives this like look where he's like, who is this? But it's just a moment that a lot of people hated the directing because they're like, you're not going to show the crowd have the realization that this person they've wanted to see for so long is finally here. Instead, you're just looking at like some dude's face just looking confused. So yeah, that's definitely one of my favorite debuts for sure.
One other thing I wanted to mention is not really a moment, but kind of like a run. So Daniel Bryan, who was considered to be like one of the biggest baby faces for a while, he did a heel turn a couple years ago, and he became the WWE champion. And his heel persona was like, he was like borderline environmental, like terrorist, eco-terrorist almost.
That's interesting.
It's great when you think about it.
Like they always say, like the best wrestling personas is just that person's natural personality, but cranked up to the nth degree. And he, in real life, he's a vegan. Like he's very like health conscious and environmental conscious. So he cranked it up to like 12. And the traditional belt is
made of leather.
It made of leather.
Oh,
so he came out with his own environmental friendly belt. And first of all, it's beautiful.
It looks like it's made out of wood. Like carved perfect wood, yeah.
And his story was like, this was carved out of an 100-year-old oak tree that naturally fell, like that wasn't cut down. Like the gems were like coral stones from the sea, and it was like a hemp belt.
and he's the bad guy?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
That was what people kept saying. Like, and he would come out and like he would like, you're drinking like a 52-ounce pop. That's too much sugar. Do better. And people were like, he's not wrong.
It really made the WWE universe take a step back, look in the mirror, and go, "Am I the heel?"
Oh, his brief like. So they were at I forgot which arena at Royal Rumble that year, but like the arena premiered like a special Royal Rumble sponsored like burger, which was like one of those humongous like 5 patties, like all the fried stuff, and he cut a promo on it, and it's he's just talking about like how garbage it is, and it was delightful.
Yeah, Daniel Bryan is definitely hilarious because I remember he was on commentary once on a match, it just as a guest commentator, and he kept talking about how the way he trains is he wrestles bears, like real life bears in the wilderness. And the whole time he's critiquing the wrestlers in the ring, saying that wouldn't work on a bear. There's no way. And then I don't know if they picked up on what was happening, but one of the wrestlers decides to put the other one in a bear hug, and he loses his mind. He's like, "There it is, the bear hug. Imagine doing this to a bear." Oh man, I miss or Bryan Danielson now.
Yeah, he jumped ship to AEW, and so he gets to use his actual name,
Yeah.
which is just a flip of his wrestling name, kind of.
That's such a genius way to come up with a fake name. Just reverse it.
Yeah.
So a lot of this has been educational for me, and I'm starting to get. I mean, I've seen some things about professional wrestling. You guys are really showing me how much fun and how big of a fans, how much they can be involved. But I kind of have questions about, so what does it take to be a wrestler? They're like, are they all actors? Are they all stunt people? Is it a mixture of both?
I mean, there's definitely a lot of wrestlers come from very, very different backgrounds. There are definitely some that I feel try to join for just the fame aspect of it, and then they're very quickly put to the ringer of like, no, this is, and they're probably right in how they describe it as being sports entertainment, where it's entertainment, yet there's a lot of athleticism involved. So there's a lot of wrestlers that come from actual amateur wrestling backgrounds. Like Brock Lesnar is probably the most famous, where he won countless national championships for, I believe it's like Minnesota, I think is like the powerhouse of like wrestling or something, like collegiate wrestling. But then like The Rock played for the Miami Hurricanes even. And then you got Kurt Angle, who's like a legitimate Olympic gold winning wrestler. But then you have some people that they do like open tryouts and stuff, and depending upon how well you do, whether it's doing a couple things in the ring, or maybe you're really good with like cutting a promo, which is like getting on the microphone and like calling somebody out or giving yourself praise and that kind of thing, being entertaining. So there's a lot of different ways that people get into it. Like Ricochet, he just loved wrestling, and he just started in like a backyard. and him and his friends would just like wrestle. Then he saw that there was a really tiny promotion in Cairo, Illinois, and he started wrestling there, and then it was getting better and better, and then they just kind of hop around doing shows all over. Eventually he spent more time in Japan than America for a while, it seemed like, and then eventually just getting clout and learning, and then now he's in the biggest stage essentially. So there's a lot of different backgrounds that people come from. I mean, some are like gymnasts, some are bodybuilders and things, but then there's really no telling, like every single wrestler, they may have similar stories of how they got there, but they're all very individual.
Yeah, and then you have like people like The Miz. Actually, I think his is the only case. The Miz
was on Real World.
Was on the Real World, yeah. That was like his first, like, I wouldn't say role, but like his first exposure on TV. And then he did like all those Road Rules versus Real World challenges.
Gotcha.
And then he kind of used that to join WWE. And you get people like that who, like, I think one of the most recent examples is like Logan Paul, who like become famous outside of WWE, and then WWE brings them in order to add that clout. And
he was also a boxer at one point, so there's always kind of some athleticism, or
it's definitely needed.
You're gonna need it.
So they used to have a show called Tough Enough, where they would have people come in a lot of times with zero wrestling background. And it was like a reality show contest, and after like every week or something, they would cut somebody and they would train them. And a lot of times the people that won didn't have like a very long kind of like career with WWE. But what's funny is there's kind of currently a lot of, especially in WWE, there's like a lot of superstars that maybe they didn't win it, but they got really far. And then they just kind of then jumped into like the indies. And because they got a little bit of exposure on television or whatever, and then they use their time in the indies and stuff to learn and get better, and then they get re-signed or something like that. So there's definitely just so many different routes, but I feel like the most common is just starting at the bottom and working your way up kind of thing. That's definitely how a lot of people get started, for sure.
Definitely. And if you want to see like the biggest contrast, like watch like a good wrestling match, and then go watch like the first day, like footage of a first day of like wrestling school, you will never be more bored in your life. Because like the thing they focus on in these wrestling schools is, before they help you build your character and figure out who you're going to be, like you're learning the basics. You're learning how to take falls without like herniating a disc every time, or how not to break your neck when you do like a backflip or a front flip. And then you do that like 5,000 more times, because the big thing they're trying to teach you is like to control your body even if you're falling. Like I remember there was a documentary they had on NXT a few years ago that was produced by WWE. I can't remember what it was called, but you had like William Regal was like teaching a class, and he kept telling people like, you know, when you do this move, land with your right foot out, and people kept not doing that, even though they would land safely. And he just kept freaking out at them, because he's like, the point is that you are in control of your body. You know to put your right foot out, and you're not like just defaulting to what feels natural, and you're not thinking about your movement, because that's how they get hurt. It's not typically in the big moves where you do like a frog splash off a ladder. It's like they're doing the same move they've done over and over, and they don't think about it, and they like twist their ankle or something.
I know it's not much of a segue at all, but I just remembered one moment that I think is very important. Is there was something called like the women's evolution that occurred, where for a long time women in wrestling were just kind of considered like eye candy for the most part. Like the most famous, like for a long time people consider like the most famous woman in wrestling as like Miss Elizabeth, who was just Macho Man Randy Savage's like valet and like manager of sorts. Just walk to the ring and maybe distract somebody, and that was it. But at the same time, there were lots of women who were legitimately trying to be the exact same professional wrestler as like Hulk Hogan and all like the big name people like Ricky the Dragon Steamboat and Bret Hart and all that. And there was definitely like sexism when it came to how the general audience kind of perceived women's wrestling a lot. And I know the show on Netflix, Glow, did a great job of kind of showing how women's wrestling how it's pictured and taken in by fans, but how much work they actually went into to deliver a product that was equal to like all like the men's wrestling that everybody was used to. But even with that, in the Attitude Era and then even like the early 2000s and stuff, women's wrestling was still kind of considered like the joke was that was always like the bathroom break during a pay-per-view. Like you could go and like come back and you wouldn't miss anything. So eventually there were a lot of female wrestlers who kept having really good matches and kind of creating a better product and all that kind of stuff. I think only once on Raw, like women ever like main evented, and like they didn't main event like anything over like a decade or something. It was like a Trish Stratus versus like Lita, and that was like a huge thing because no one expected it. And also great match and insane because Lita almost breaks her neck. It's gnarly, but anyway, in the indies though, a lot of women were being like the bigger stars than some of the men, and that happened a lot with NXT, which was like the minor league, as I said, of like WWE. Well, eventually, I think it was after WrestleMania. I can't even remember, but essentially, the female champion was in the ring, but then all of a sudden, all these more indie known wrestlers are from NXT were coming to the ring, and they just kind of announced that this was like an evolution where women were going to like be, you know, the top, and that it were no longer divas was a big thing. They used to always be called divas.
I actually remember that from the 90s.
Yeah, they had like the Divas Championship, and now it's just the Women's Championship.
Yeah, and it's such a breath of fresh air because they even had a couple of their own pay-per-views that were women only, and it's been some of the coolest stuff. And it's probably a really cool thing. The women's evolution is like they had like a heel group, and they were like, no, we're divas, you know, and they just had to have a target to be like, all right, we need to personify this like mentality and stuff, and they just got the short end of the straw basically. But it's really cool because four of the main kind of would-be face, Sasha Banks, Bayley, Charlotte Flair, and Becky Lynch, they were all considered like the four horsewomen because back in the day there was a group called the Four Horsemen. They're considered like the best of the best and stuff. So just that whole shift in the perception of women's wrestling has been probably one of the best breaths of fresh air in wrestling as of late.
That's been over like the past like 10 years, 20.
Yeah, I think it happened. Well, that
was like several 2015, 2016.
Okay,
I think
so
it really
sooner.
when it started to ramp up.
Yeah, but it was just something that, you know, people are like, oh, that will never sell and stuff and blah, blah, blah. It's not as good. But they're like, yo, we're having like insane matches. Like in the indies, they still do like intergender like matches where it's like men versus women and stuff. And it's just like throw a dude off of a ladder and stuff. And it's just insanity. And yeah, it's really nuts.
Yeah, and they've had some really remarkable milestones since then. Like they've had women main event WrestleMania twice, which WrestleMania is like the Super Bowl of wrestling.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And then they've actually had women wrestle in the Middle East, which was when they started doing those shows in Saudi Arabia. Because they are very conservative over there, women were not allowed to be on the show for a while because women aren't allowed to participate in athletics, and they were finally able to start having women's wrestling matches over there now. And so it started off with just one, and now they like whenever they do a pay-per-view over there, they'll have like 3 to 4 women's matches.
Excellent.
We'll go ahead and like get into our favorite matches now, which since you as someone from the outside. I was trying to think of ones that like if someone's like ever going to be like, hey, you know, what's going to get me into wrestling? Like the wrestling matches I would like recommend to you to give you an idea of like here's the spectacle of wrestling in its purest form. So one of the ones I was looking into, this was back in like the early 2010s, I think. This was for a promotion called Ring of Honor, which is still around. And it was Kevin Steen versus El Generico for the Ring of Honor Championship. It was a ladder match. Okay. And it's one of the most destructive matches I've ever seen. People really, like, both of the guys are really pushing their bodies, doing, I won't spoil spots, but man, like, some of the things they did were just insane. And I can't imagine, like, people approving some of these spots in WWE. Which, you know, nowadays, like Kevin Steen is now Kevin Owens in WWE. El Generico is now Sami Zayn in WWE without the mask. Probably one of the best heels currently. So yeah, that's my first choice there.
And there's a ladder involved, you said?
Well, multiple. Lots of various sizes. Like
okay, now you're talking.
They bought out Lowe's that day. Yeah.
I see your ladders, and I raise you tables and chairs. Where I would suggest it even turned into its own pay-per-view. Like, it was at first just known as the tables, ladders, and chairs match. Where guess what's legal? Tables, ladders, and chairs. Because those are foreign objects. They do not belong in a ring. But
no,
by golly, we're going to put them in this match. And eventually that ended up becoming a pay-per-view where there are surprisingly not as many tables, ladders, and chairs in the matches, which makes not as much sense really if you think about it. But the first two TLC matches, the first one especially, it's for me it was like the pinnacle of tag team wrestling for a while when I was like growing up. You had, of course, the Dudley Boys with a Z, the Hardy Boys with a Z, and then Edge and Christian.
With a Z.
Silent. So it was the three of them. So it's already like a triple threat tag team match, but they have the belts hanging above the ring, and they have to climb a ladder to get up to get to the belts and take them. Then whoever gets the belts, they win. And it's just some of the most insane spots ever where people are being thrown through tables. One of the most I don't even really want to announce it, but there's an amazing spot with Jeff Hardy and Edge where someone is hanging and they had belts in his grasp. Yes, they are, because he's hanging from the ceiling on the belts. And then somebody does something about it. And it is, remember when I was talking about pops? One of the biggest pops ever for a move. Not like an entrance or anything, just a move, because it was unbelievable.
Those, and usually those belts are hanging how high? Like usually like 12 or 15 feet.
I mean, they are up there.
They're up there, yeah. So
it's a hard fall, hard long fall.
Yeah, I remember that was the first pay-per-view I watched as a kid. It was just amazing.
Was that 17?
Yeah, I think so.
Which also has one of the best promos for the main event, which is The Rock versus Stone Cold, the two biggest stars ever, and to the background song of My Way by Limp Bizkit.
Oh.
Sold.
There you go.
Which we, as the library, have some of this stuff, don't we? To check out. I know I see...
we have a lot of WWE DVDs. We have some TNA wrestling DVDs.
Yeah, they're all under sport, and I believe that since those are considered as like documentaries, you can get unlimited checkouts with those.
Yeah, so unlike the normal 10 DVD cap for features, that does not apply here.
Oh my, so I can get everything.
Yeah, just about, yeah.
Cool.
Wish I was more prepared, because I'm like, man, I could like send you like a list of promos to watch. And
yeah, the promos are almost as entertaining as some of the matches. I would also say... if you're more into like the extreme kind of wrestling with like chairs and stuff like that, that Invasion storyline, they had their own pay-per-view called, can you guess it?
Is it called Invasion?
That is correct.
Hey!
Yeah. But it's
not known for subtlety.
It's
yeah.
Rob Van Dam versus Jeff Hardy of the Hardy Boys with the Z. And it's a great match because the Invasion, everyone was like, we don't like them. They're invading the WWE. We don't like them. But everyone's like, but RVD is cool. We like him, though.
He's cool. The rest of you.
All of the Invasion people would get booed, but everyone cheered for RVD just because he was just so cool. And then you had Jeff Hardy, who was kind of like the darling of WWE for like a long, long time because he did all the cool extreme stuff and he wore the weird like balloony pants and stuff. It's weird. You just had to see it.
Yeah.
They're like the black pants that you would get from like Hot Topic with like the chains and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, still rocking that style in his 40s too.
I remember a lot of cutoff jeans in the 90s and early 2000s.
If you want to know what the big 90s styles were, just watch like a Hardy's Boy match, like
Hardy's Boys with a Z.
Hardy's Boys with a Z.
Okay.
I believe so.
Not the mystery solving duo.
Correct. Yes.
Correct. Yeah. I know there's a fine line between the two, so
I think that's how they avoided the copyright issue, is to put a Z at the end.
Did they ever have fun with it and do a mystery themed episode?
They really missed out.
Oh no, we got to get them on the line.
There was a tag team known as the Fashion Police, and they were solving crimes of various natures. That was fun.
Atrocities of fashion.
Yeah.
That was great.
So we've talked about like some of the more destructive matches, but when it comes to like storytelling, I think one of my favorite matches of all time is from the NXT Toronto Takeover 2017 pay-per-view. It's DIY versus the Revival in a 2 out of 3 falls match. I picked this one because this is like the ultimate like underdog story of like you're watching. It's the third act of a movie where you see like the hero constantly have to come over obstacle after obstacle after obstacle, which in this case the underdog is DIY, and this is like the culmination of like a 5-month storyline where they are trying to beat the Revival, and the Revival keeps cheating or they keep like injuring someone from DIY, just being like sneaky snakes. And finally this has like the probably one of the best endings to any wrestling match ever. Like just the way like the crowd gets into it, it's awesome.
Yeah, then also from a NXT Takeover event, I gotta rep him because I'm wearing a shirt right now too. Ricochet versus Adam Cole. Because you had Ricochet, who became like one of the most well-known high flyers, like every crazy flip, but also could like sell a move like no one else, and selling being, making it look like a move is super, super destructive and whatnot. And Adam Cole is probably one of like the bigger names in wrestling in terms of not only is he good in the ring, but he cuts great promos and all that kind of stuff, and he's great at being a heel. So they put on like a clinic in that match, and then there's just so many matches as well that you try to like find on YouTube, but you can probably only find like highlight clips, really.
Yeah,
because there's also Kenny Omega versus Okada, and there's like documentary videos on YouTube just talking about the rivalry and stuff of how because Okada was essentially like the John Cena of like New Japan, where he's like can't be defeated, but at the same time was just so much move variety and stuff. And Kenny Omega was this Canadian guy in Japan who also all of a sudden like speaks Japanese, by the way, and like pretty well too.
Like almost fluently.
Yeah, and that's also a great promo too, because the crowd's just not expecting it because he's speaking English, and all of a sudden he's like, no, how about I speak this way? And then the crowd just is like, oh
yeah.
So that's great. And then an old match that's great is the Macho Man Randy Savage versus Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. I think it's like WrestleMania 2.
Did you say Ricky
the Dragon Steamboat?
The Dragon Steamboat.
Yeah.
This is a person.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
This is wonderful.
Apparently, Randy Savage was so particular about having a perfect match every single match that he would memorize the entire match throughout. Like sometimes wrestlers will kind of call it on the fly, like if something goes wrong, or even if they're just like, hey, we kind of know the general idea, we can kind of freestyle the rest. He would be like, no, we're going to do every single thing on this list. And apparently it's like one of the most best choreographed older matches from like the 80s. So, like, that's amazing. Bayley versus Sasha is an amazing match. That's 2 of the 4 horsewomen. Yeah, we can just go on and on. I feel like with
that
like
was like
matches.
that was the first like female like main event for an NXT takeover too.
Yeah, definitely.
But you're talking about Ricochet and like the Adam Cole match. It's something like I was thinking about with that match is, you see referees in the wrestling match, you're just like, what are they there for? This is scripted. Like, what's the point of them? And part of it is they're there for the storyline to like call the match, but also you can kind of think of them as like being the mediator between the fantasy wrestling and the reality. So they're there to like call things off or like check in on wrestling. Like you'll see them. Whenever a wrestler takes like a bump, you'll see the referee automatically go to them, and they're all constantly asking them, hey, you okay? And the wrestler, you're like, sometimes the ring is mic'd up enough where you can hear him say like, oh yeah, I'm good, even though he just like landed on his head. But I would hate to be the referee in like a Ricochet match, because like 90% of the time I'm like, he's dead. Like he's not getting, like there's like several spots in the Adam Cole and Ricochet match I'm like, no, the referee's got to do the X, which is like when you see them do the X, most of the time that means like someone is legitimately hurt.
Yeah, but I've also heard that there's like 2 X's. There's one where they do it above their head, then one like where they go like below like their waist or whatever, and like one's fake to make because the crowd has gotten smarter to because for a long time wrestling fans were just like as we started, it's real to me, like this is real. And I mean, there's like stories of like, and there's even videos of like fans getting so mad that they rushed the ring to try and save their favorite wrestler. There's a really famous one of like, it was like Triple H versus Stone Cold, and Stone Cold's supposed to be the good guy and stuff, and this guy like jumps into the ring and tries to like attack both of them, and it's funny because Triple H had just been hit with a special move like the Stone Cold Stunner, so he's supposed to be like out of it and stuff, but he like springs into action, just tackles this guy to the ground, and they're like, yeah, he could have had like a knife or something. We had no idea. So, but anyway, that's how the fans were back in the day, but now they're smart. They kind of know more that it's scripted and whatnot. So because everyone kind of grew to know that, oh, the X means, oh no, someone's really hurt. For some storylines and some match spots, they've started doing that as a basic decoy, like a fake. And then people are like, oh my gosh, they're really actually hurt, just to add up to like the moment of like, oh, they're back, they're okay. I can't believe it.
Which I mean, I'd be interested to see what qualifications and certifications you need to be a referee, because I mean, I'm sure they have some kind of medical background.
Some of it's not necessarily. A lot of them are just like wrestlers themselves.
Okay. Yeah, but, like some may very well have been a wrestler that maybe they had an injury where they couldn't really do like a full-time wrestler, because a lot of times referees don't take many bumps, that kind of thing. They may every once in a while, but for the most part, they're unharmed for the most part.
Yeah, I wonder if they make them do something though, like some training. What's the referee training look like? That's what I'm interested in.
I mean, anyway. I think like one of the things I remember. This thing got released several years ago where it was like the backstage rules for like WWE live events, and like one of the things was like, as a referee, they're like, you have to, if someone's legitimately hurt, you have to talk them down, because there's this like macho mindset of like, when you're hurt, you're like, oh, I still have to finish the match, like I still have to like see this thing through to the end. And you'll have guys with like broken legs or like torn pectoral, and so like that's part of the referee's job too, that they have to identify like, no, this is a legitimate injury and you're going to like make it worse if you keep going. So I think there has to be some type of medical training. So like Chase mentioned earlier, we have tons, or was it you, Ryan? I don't know. Someone did. We have tons of wrestling DVDs available for you. A lot of them from WWE, some from other promotions. Also, we have tons of books, like not just about like chronicling wrestling, but also like analysis pieces and essays on like just wrestling and the spectacle of it. So definitely check those out.
And several biographies. Like that's definitely one of the cool ways that wrestlers who can no longer wrestle, which that's kind of like their financial income and stuff, but then they can no longer do it. A lot of them do write books. I know I've seen there's a gigantic Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, to be more specifically, biography. It's like the size of like a desktop computer. Like it's gigantic. So there's a lot of really cool biographies that we also have.
Yeah, you guys have provided some fantastic entry points too with your match descriptions and everything. So thank you so much. I feel ready to tackle it. It's been great.
We're out. Thank you guys very much.